Today I'm going to talk about Microsoft Teams and governance. But before I do, some yeah, 1 second. Sorry about that. Let me see. Everything is correct. Yeah, should be fine. Okay. No, I don't know. I did the Planetronics headset. Did that. Very strange. So let me see. Okay. So yeah, a couple of announcements. So of course, this virtual conference is a little bit of a replacement for the SharePoint conference that was supposed to take place in Las Vegas. So now the conference has been moved to next year and has a new name. So you can see it on the screen here. So it'll be in March in Vegas again, and it's now going to be called the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference. Of course, I also want to thank the sponsors for making this event possible, for making it free as well for you to participate. So if you have time, please check out the websites, and they definitely all good products out there. So a little bit of an introduction. My name is Jasper Oosterveld. I live and work in Amsterdam, Netherlands, for a company called InSpark. The astronaut is very excited. I think he's the most excited out of all of us. I work as a modern workplace consultant, and my main activities are implementing Microsoft Teams with our customers, with a focus on governance and compliance. So that's also what I'm going to talk with you today about. And I've been a Microsoft MVP for many years. So let's continue. Almost there, almost there. There's also some giveaways. So on the left bottom of the slide, you'll see an URL. So if you're interested in winning one of those VR sets, definitely check it out. A couple of things you need to do. You need to visit the vendors booth sessions and watch videos. Submit your answers to enter the Revel, and apparently you need at least 5 correct answers. Then submit for a chance to win 1 of 3, and there will be 1 for each region. So that's good. Yeah, so okay, all straight into it. So what do you do to basically achieve a successful governance strategy for Microsoft Teams? So what do we do at InSpark? We do this in 3 steps. The first one is we organize a workshop. And the second one is we process all the information and decisions from the workshop and process it into a governance strategy. And last but not least, you also need to implement your strategy, of course. So those are basically 3 steps you take. And these are the ones I want to go over with you today. But before I do that, I always sit down with customers, and I always take a step back and always talk about what is Microsoft Teams, right? What is it? What does it offer you? What are the benefits? Because not everybody knows this, right? Of course, most people, especially these days, have heard of Microsoft Teams, but it doesn't mean they all know what it can or cannot do. So it's good to give a little bit of an overview. I'm not going to do a demo with you today because of the time I have available for this session, but I will talk with you about the benefits and the business value. So what I'm talking with you today is exactly how I talk to my customers as well. So what I say, of course, a little bit of marketing, but Microsoft Teams is the hub for collaboration. To be fair, I also often use communication as well, because I think it's a perfect communication platform as well. And then I say it consists out of a couple components. First one is chat. And the slides after this one, I'll dive a little bit more into depth. Say it consists out of meetings. Calling, I mentioned here, but I basically take it out of scope because this is more aimed at the call center functionality, and that's just not part of my expertise, our expertise. If we have customers who want to do governance around that, we have a partner we work with together. So also for this session, I will leave it out of scope. Talk about files, and last but not least, of course, apps and workflows. So chat. So I think chat is ideal for companies who are still very formal, more close, maybe more really bound to like hierarchy. I think if you use chat, you can really open it up, because chat is just a totally different way of communicating, right? You can use the giveys, the memes, the emojis, and it's just more informal, more fun, lightweight. And I really see that helping with those kind of clients who want to be more informal, that definitely helps achieve a culture like that, right? And of course, ideally, it also reduces the amount of emails. That said, I do see a notification issue popping up. So yeah, our email reduces, but now we get a lot more notifications in Teams. It's a bit of a different story. Of course, there's a way to manage that, but definitely I see email decreasing. And this is something you also have to help your colleagues or customers with, because it takes a while for customers to transition from communicating from email to Teams. I even still see that internally. So I'm like, well, they have a name for me. I won't repeat it here because it's not that nice, but they mean it nice, but it's not nice to say. But I say, like, why are you emailing me? Well, you can use chat for Teams. And what I even sometimes do is copy their email content, put it in the channel, and then get a copy of the chat and forward it an email. A couple people really love that. So, but it definitely your email definitely reduces. And of course, everywhere we are, you can use the Microsoft Teams app. That's a really good and solid app to still communicate and collaborate with your colleagues or maybe your partners as well. So efficient meetings. That's the next one. So what I really like about Teams is that you can have efficient efficient meetings. What I mean by that is that you don't have to send around a presentation beforehand or a document, right? You can just store it at one location, share your screen, share the link to the document. Everybody can collaborate. When we were still at the office, we have a service hub. So with the service hub, we also have the whiteboard application. That's a fantastic cool app because you can just make notes and everybody sees it and everybody can contribute at the same time. So that results in definitely more efficient meetings. And the next up is reduce travel. Well, this one is kind of with the whole COVID crisis, it's kind of like, yeah, doesn't really matter anymore. But imagine that this not happening or it's over. Yeah, you don't have to travel to your customer, for example, or your clients to have a meeting. You can just do it online and increase engagement. That's really aimed at what we're basically doing now, right? We're doing live meetings, and it's a good way to reach a large audience and get their engagement around, for example, strategy or important announcements such as the COVID crisis. Files. Well, again, ideally, if you start working in teams and you use it, for example, for department usage or for your projects, your files regarding the department or regarding that project are stored in the team, right? So yeah, ideally, you shouldn't need a lot of time to search for those files. So it definitely will save you time, right? Ideal situation. I think we all know in the real world it doesn't always happen like that, but I definitely see this becoming a lot easier by using Teams. And there's also a smarter way to collaborate, and that's of course by working together in an office document. And you probably hear me saying this, you're like, oh, geez, man, that's been out for so many years. Yeah, I know, but there's still so many clients who still are not aware of this. And every time I show it, people really like it, and they definitely immediately see the benefit of it. So again, it's more efficient because you don't have to email a file. You just work together, you finish your stuff, and the document is ready, right? And I think the best experience in my eyes is when in Word and PowerPoint. Not a huge fan of Excel, and OneNote have some issues with versioning, but Word and PowerPoint are excellent. And of course, you can also work together with guests, right? You can invite your suppliers or your clients and work together within your team instead of, again, emailing a file, getting it back, and processing any changes. It's just a lot more efficient to work together within teams, right? With everybody, basically. This one I really like, and it's not necessarily my main of expertise. I don't do that much with apps and workflows these days, but I like to show you how how this benefit actually our company. So when we're still at the office, you were able to join with lunch during lunchtime. uh, and then if you, for example, wanted to use the lunch provided by InSpark, you had to pay for it. I think, I don't know, a couple euros or something, right? But our back office employee, she had to basically write down, oh, Jasper at lunch, tick. Peter at lunch, tick. Not very efficient, not the most fun job to do. So a colleague of mine, we created a bot in Teams. It recognizes if you are at the office and sends you a message, hey, I noticed you're at the office. Did you have lunch? Or did you participate in lunch? And then it's the honorary system, right? So it's yes or no. Well, I think we're all adults, and yeah, well, I'm trying to think about the good of people, so I'm expecting everybody to answer this correctly. And what happens is, if you say yes, a signal is sent to, in this case, an external system. It's called AFAS. I think it's only in the Netherlands, not sure, but it's like a finance system. And then it ticks that, so it's automatically withdrawn from your salary at the end of the month. So what happens is our back office employee, she doesn't have to do this annoying job anymore, so she can focus on other things. So this also leads to saving costs. This is just one example. There are probably many more out there, but I just really like this one because it's so simple and it immediately solved so many things, and it really made somebody's life easier. And yeah, it's just great. So I think there's definitely a lot of value in this. So once I've done that, I basically just want to dive into a demo and then I show, how you can work with channels and how you can reply and how you can work with files, like a 15 to 20-minute demo to give people really a good insights in what Teams is and what it can do. And then basically I go to this slide basically after the demo, and then I hope people have seen it does increase their productivity. And it's also mainly due to the reduction of email, being able to work within one application, and it just everything looks more smooth, and it's just easy to understand. And so we can focus on other things as well. So our productivity increases. And I know it's a bit of a marketing term, but it definitely see this happening though. And this again, this is so powerful, right? You can do so many things from within Teams, right? I use it to work with files, to chat with colleagues, to check my agenda, and we use it to work. I use that bot, for example, for with the lunch one. Not now, but it also asks, for example, about your mood these days. How are you doing? How are you feeling? And I basically only have to switch with Outlook, and of course, sometimes the browser. But it definitely is reduced in using Teams, and just makes my life a lot more easier and efficient. There's a lot of companies out there who still want to accelerate their digital transformation. So they want to move to the cloud to be more innovative, to reduce their cost. And Microsoft Teams is a cloud-based application. So so that does definitely helps with accelerate this process. And last but not least is that you're also you're compliant and secure from your data storage point of view, right? Your data is stored safely with Microsoft in their data centers. But, and this is very important, and I tell this to all my customers, is you are responsible for the data once it's at your devices. You cannot lose a laptop and then call Microsoft and say, oh, well, what are you going to do about it? It's gone. It's like, well, it's your responsibility. It's not our device, right? We have provided you with services and tools to protect your data. You didn't do that, right? So very important that you take care of that part, right? Microsoft helps with providing services, but at the end of the day, you are responsible. Now I'm just going to try quickly a look if there are any questions. I have no idea. Let me see. No, I don't see any announcements, so it should be good. So next one, next slide. So once I've done this, I talk to my customers and then ask them, okay, imagine now you start rolling out Teams. What are your worries? I see a lot of the same same points coming up, right? Same worries. So one of them is they're afraid there will be an explosion of teams, right? There will be hundreds of teams. The next one will be a duplication of teams. So like people are going to create 5 marketing teams, for example. And let's be fair, that is, if you use the self-service model, that is a reality because Microsoft Teams doesn't tell you, hey, there is already a marketing team, right? It just creates a new one. And within SharePoint, you get a URL with a unique number behind it. So that is definitely a valid worry. They're also thinking from IT, like, okay, we're trying to manage it, but we have no idea what the purpose is of the team, right? Why is it being used? How is it being used? It can be difficult to find teams, and that's also correct because in the search for teams, if you're in the Teams application and you want to search for a team, it's not that easy. Like it's not the greatest search engine out there. Complex. There's still a lot of customers who actually find the self-certification a bit complex. And I think it lies mainly in the fact that you have that option to say you want to base an existing team on, for example, I think it still says an Office 365 group. Yeah, that's not really a term that everybody's familiar with. So it can be a bit of a complex mechanism to create new teams. Very valid these days. There's a lot of attacks out there. There's a lot of valuable data that can leak outside your company walls, right? So this is one that often comes up with like the CISOs, the people who are responsible for the security, the compliance part. Yeah, if if everybody just starts uploading all data in Teams, there's a high risk of a data leak. So all these things, if you don't really do anything with it, can result in, for example, a failed user adoption, right? If it's too complex, can't find anything, then people aren't going to stop using it, and that will be a huge shame. And of course, the other part will be an increased IT maintenance. IT is like a day job in managing all these hundreds of teams that are created, and they don't know if they can delete something or somebody shouldn't have access, right? So these are very two realistic things that can happen if you don't apply any governance. So next up, of course, that's the importance of governance. So a couple of things I always talk to customers about. It's like, why is it important, right? They have seen this by now, right? I've done the demo, talked about the worries, and they kind of see why it's important by now. I think that's why it's good to use that interaction with them. Like, what are your worries when you see this, and think about how it will be used within your organization. So I think it's very important to connect the IT and the business together, right? Um, Mainly to prevent miscommunication, for example, and they also need to understand from each other what are their responsibilities, what are their requirements, and they often want the same thing, right? It's not that IT doesn't want business to collaborate. No, they do, but by the end of the day, if something goes wrong, if shit hits the fan, they'll go to IT. It's not like the business will get blamed, it's IT who gets blamed. So bring these two together, right? So if you work on your governance strategy, make sure you have a mix of these two audiences. It's very important. This and governance also definitely contributes to a successful adoption, because within governance, you're going to take certain decisions like, are people going to be able to use the self-service mechanism within Microsoft Teams? Are we able to work with guests? How do you work with files, right? And these are things you have to communicate towards your colleagues, or train people, right? So, and these are decisions you take within the governance side of things. So when you implement Microsoft Teams, make sure you do governance and adoption, do both of these things, and bring people together. And let's say I'm the consultant doing the governance part. I need to communicate with my counterpart who's doing the adoption, right? Because it's so intertwined. And of course, you also can have a lot of internal procedures and laws and regulations. So if we look at the procedures, now, for example, there are a lot of companies out there who have certain procedures in place for requesting collaboration environments, or, for example, working with third-party apps. Well, if you just turn on Teams, you can work with all the third-party, well, not all of them, but a lot of third-party apps out there. And it's not necessarily something that is allowed, right? And that's something you have to match. You have to match the usage of Teams with your internal procedures. And next to that, of course, also very important are law and regulations. So I live in Europe, so we have GDPR. So you need to make sure that the usage of Teams complies with GDPR. And last but not least, this is a bit of the technical part. Is how you need to you need to manage Microsoft 365 groups. And this part is often a bit tricky for the business users. IT has often heard of this, so that for them it's a little bit easier to understand. But how I try to explain it is that, imagine you just launch Teams with no governance. It's not just that a team is created, a lot more happens. The first thing happens is that a group is created within Azure AD. So imagine you have an admin who is responsible for managing that part. He or she will be like, what's going on? Why are all these hundreds of groups here, right? So that can what can lead to that is that he or she will delete it. And then there's a lot more services are created: the SharePoint team side, the group and stream, and a shared calendar, et cetera, and et cetera. And again, if people are managing these services, they can be like, yeah, now there's some things can happen, like stuff can be deleted. And people also need to learn how to work with these services. Somebody needs to know how Planner works, how SharePoint works, right? So again, this is where the adoption kicks in as well. So Teams touches everything, basically, almost everything within your Office 365 tenant. And this is, no, yeah, I want to say this is one example for me to tell, not for the customer. But we had a customer who just turned on Teams for a while, and they have branches in multiple countries. And I believe somebody in the US created a team called Test. But I don't know why. The person thought it was a good idea. Okay, test started for some reason, not only named the test, started uploading a lot of sensitive content in there. Now, of course, somebody from IT was like, "Oh, this is test. Well, I'm cleaning up our tenant." Deleted it. Thank God, within like 30 days, somebody found out, so it was restored. But it could have led to like a serious, like, business critical issue, right? So that's, again, I like this to use this example to really show why governance is really important, and use better names for calling your teams, of course. So the next step will be doing a governance workshop, and a couple topics included. Again, due to time restriction sounds negative, but I have 15 minutes. I cannot go over all of these, but you need to talk about the scope of your governance. You need to talk about your vision and goals. Why are you doing this? And why are you using Teams? What are the benefits? Again, connected with adoption, because that basically should be editing your adoption strategy as well. And we'll a little bit go back. If you talk about scope, it's not just the technical part, but it's also the business scenarios. So, for example, we put out of scope calling with Microsoft Teams, and then we say that's the calling like the data, the call center calling, not just the calling like what you do normally with colleagues, but that part, and then put some technologies out of scope as well. Needs to be a steering committee, right? There needs to be a group of people who come together after this and make sure all the agreements are held. Like people follow up the agreements, the governance strategy is updated, etc. You need to talk about roles and responsibilities. So who is, for example, the Teams administrator? What departments have a certain role and responsibility to the rollout and usage of Teams? This is the one we're going to dive into a little bit deeper after this. Processes and procedures. For example, you need to think about people joining the company, leaving the company, and how that impacts the assignment of licenses and access to Teams. How are you going to do that? Are you going to automate that, for example, or are you going to do it manually? And last but not least, is new features and updates, right? Microsoft Teams is part of Office 365 that has regular updates, right? How are you gonna process those updates? How are you gonna anticipate it? How are you gonna communicate it towards your colleagues? That's all stuff you need to discuss there, and also make some agreements upon. So next up is the Microsoft Teams workload. Well, it's a pretty long list of stuff you have to go over. This is like a governance workshop. It's not something you do in half an hour. It really, we use 2 hours. We do it in 2 parts. So we use 2 hours for basically introduction, demo, and creating awareness. And then the second one, we basically make sure decisions are being made. So the customer has like a couple of weeks to think about these topics, make decisions. We help them, and ideally 2 to 3 weeks later, we're able to go over with, and then within like say a month, we finalize the governance plan. So these are the topics, and we'll go over these. So you also need to talk with your customer and ask, how are you going to use Teams? Do you have certain collaboration templates in mind? And I just listed 4 here, like the most common ones I've seen, right? So do that first, because are you want to use it for projects, or maybe just for departments, or just for collaboration without like making a distinction between these 4? But this is the first thing you have to do, right? Once you've done that, then you need to go over the naming convention. Oh, sorry, I forgot. I always do a little bit of advice. I think I added this later on in the slides, so I didn't remember. But keep it simple, start small. Don't define like 10 collaboration formats. Just start with 1 or 2, right? You can always extend it on a later time. So my advice would be start with departments and projects. Then you need to go over naming convention. Yeah, you have a couple options, right? You can use, for example, the naming policy within Azure AD, where you automatically assign a word and prefix and or suffix with an AAD property. So that means that when somebody creates a team, it, for example, looks at your department. So I create a team called Jasper Collaboration, and it automatically adds my department behind it. That's a way to do it, right? That's an option. You do need a P1 license for that. The second one is can connect it to a provisioning solution, right? By using a provisioning solution, you can apply a naming convention. There's a lot of third-party tools out there. We have our own solution, but you can say, okay, when somebody selects a project, he wants to request a project team. This, for example, the letters, the abbreviation PRJ is automatically added in front of the team name. You can do that. The next one, of course, is if you go for the self-service scenario, leave it up to employees, right? They can pick one if they want. You'll probably realize they won't do it, but that is an option, or you just don't, right? It's not obligated, right? I included an example why for some scenarios it's definitely useful, but it's not for all of them. So don't get too hung up on this one. It's optional, right? These are just 2 examples. So this is the most common ones. So you can apply naming convention for Teams. So again, this is a project example, and if you also want to add a custom URL to SharePoint, you can do it too. But that's often by using a provisioning solution. I haven't found a way to do this out of the box. So what are some advantages and challenges of naming convention? Well, it does improve the findability of a team. It will be easier to find. Some challenges is if you go for that automatic naming policy, your AAD needs to be up to date. Otherwise, yeah, let's say you use a department or a region, and and it says US and you live in Europe, where Europe, it doesn't make any sense. So it needs to be up to date. Let's say you have multiple collaboration formats, templates, so departments, projects. It's hard to find a word that works with that, right? To like, you can use collaboration, but it's just kind of vague, so that often doesn't work for that. If you go for self-service, employees will forget. You can tell them, you can use like guidelines, but people will just forget. It's not even on purpose what they just do. So again, if you want to have a strict naming policy for multiple collaboration templates, you will have to use a provisioning solution. No shame in that, of course. I'm not judging, but that's the case. Again, only apply when it's necessary. And this is the example. So we had a local district. I'm not going to try to pronounce that first word, but I added it there so for some people know what I mean. So if you have a district who basically shares their tenant with multiple districts, yeah. So for them, it's really, they need to have a naming policy so they can see this team belongs to this district, because otherwise it's just they have no idea. It's hard to manage. So in that case, definitely understand why that's important. External access, couple options, very simple. You can allow it for all teams. It's not going to be a shocker what's coming up. You allow it for a selection of teams. You can disable it for all teams. So like, no, just don't want to use external access. And these days you also have a preview within the sensitivity labels where you can say if somebody picks this label, and I will show an example later, the external access will be turned on or off. That's still in preview, but that's coming up. Some advantages and challenges. Well, you can reduce shadow IT for sure, because that's why I think it's a good idea to just turn it on by default, because people will find different ways and they will just lose track and the ability to monitor files being shared with external people in this case. It will definitely increase your collaboration. It's just easier to collaborate within teams than by emailing documents. Some challenges is, well, once you start to invite external people within your environment, of course, they need to have access. That's one thing, right? You need to give them the permissions to access your team. But let's be honest, after that, they can do whatever they want. They can download files and they can share it with the whole world. That's why it's very important to think about data classification by using sensitivity labels. Topic we take out of scope for the workshop, but we make sure the customer understands how important and crucial it is. So they start a project site, maybe after the workshop or at the same time to look into this topic. The owners are the ones who are able to invite guests, so they have that responsibility. So you need to make sure they're aware of that, and also the risk and the responsibilities basically. I would turn it on for all teams because the shadow IT is a huge risk, and this will just make things a lot easier, especially for users. I see a lot of people probably wondering that's a terrible idea. Definitely manage it, right? Not saying turn it on and then look the other way. Apply periodic review, and you can use Azure Access Reviews with that. It's a pretty cool service, actually. I haven't seen used a lot, but it definitely has a lot of potential, where you can set a periodic review on a selection of teams. And the owners, they need to review the guests, but also the internal members. You can use that. It does require a higher license, or you can create your own solution. We're basically using one that we saw on the website from ATworks. I'm sorry, I pronounced it wrong. Martina Grom and Tony, and it's a really, really nice solution. And basically, the owners will get an email saying these are the guests in your team. So check that out for sure. Or you can just create your own one, because we and they are also using standard services. But definitely recommend using it. Apply social control. In the general channel, you will see names popping up. It will say Jasper invited John Doe guest. It's like, well, why are you doing that? I don't think you should invite guests here. So you have some social control as well. Educate your team owners, because they're the ones able to do that. Again, I will keep repeating that compliance stuff. So definitely start with your data classification projects as well. Next up, expiration policy. So with expiration policy, you can basically determine that after a set amount of days, a team can be automatically removed. So what will happen is, let's say I set it for 6 months. 30 days before that 6 months expire, and that's 6 months after the creation date, the owners will get an email asking them, do you want to keep the team or do you want to remove it? If they say remove, it'll be removed to a recycle bin for 30 days, and then everything will be deleted after those 30 days. Let's say they don't answer, they will get another one 15 days and then 1 day, and then after that it will be automatically deleted. So that's a way to basically keep your environment clean for unused teams. A couple options. Again, it's very similar to the external access one. It's for all teams. selection of teams. You don't have to do it again. It's optional. It's not necessary. You do need this license, so if you want to start using it, so that's important to realize. Although I do see a lot of customers have this nowadays. It's not really, a couple of years ago, this wasn't like the norm, and these days most of them have it. But still, good to know. Again, this is very nice. Microsoft introduced an activity check, I believe, beginning of the year, end of last year, where the system checks if there's any usage around files in SharePoint and if there's any usage around Teams. And here you can see what this usage is. If that happens, the team will be automatically renewed. So the owners won't even get an email, so they won't notice. So again, some advantages and challenges. It definitely keeps your environment clean because it gets rid of these unused teams. Yeah, IT doesn't have to do it manually. You can go to the report center and do an export, an export, an export of the activity of all your teams, and then go over it yourself. Yeah, you can do that, or you can use this, and it's done for you. So yeah, reduces maintenance, saves some time. Some challenges is you do rely on the Microsoft default backup and restore, because if something is gone and somebody's like, oh no, why did I do that? Yeah, it's gone after those 30 days, right? If you just use the Microsoft backup and restore. A lot of responsibility for the owners, because they are basically saying, okay, it can go or it can stay. You need to have your retention policies clear. So, because especially these days, especially in Europe, there's a lot of type of files need to be saved for a certain amount of time and then deleted. Yeah, that if you don't know what your retention policies are, you don't implement them, this will become an issue. So before you start using expiration policy and you implement it, make sure you are aware what your retention policies are and also apply these within teams. And just like the data classification, we take it out of the workshop. We reference to it. We say this is out of scope, but it needs to be picked up. And then ideally, this can also be a little bit of an upsell for you as a consultancy agency to also help your client with this in a separate project. That said, I do advise to turn it on for a year. And definitely then also, because within that year, you need to have your retention policies clear as well, so you can always apply that along the way. But a year is a long time, so I think that gives you enough space to come up with retention policies and apply those. Privacy, again, a couple options for your teams. Private, that means the owner, the person who creates the team, he or she need to give people access. Public teams, everybody can join, and org-wide will automatically add the whole organization apart from external people within that team. I haven't seen it being used a lot. I think some customers use it for, not ours, but there's some people out there who use it for a replacement of Yammer. Yeah, I got that a while ago because there's not much was happening in Yammer these days. It's really good actually. I'm really happy to see how it's going. There's a lot of improvements. So yeah, I don't see much usage for this, but definitely realize what it does and what happens. I believe you can create a max of 5 or 10. Don't pin me down on it, but I think it's around that. I advise to try to keep as much open by default because you want to stimulate knowledge sharing, collaboration. That said, I'm not an idiot, a little bit, but I know there's some situations where it needs to be closed. It's just too sensitive. But try to keep it as open as possible. Yeah, and again, owners can change it, right? It's nothing. I had some customers asking, can we turn it off? No, they just can't change the setting because they're basically the admins of that team. So be aware of that. It's not a huge issue, but you need to be aware and tell people. So again, next up, we're just going down the list. I know it can see a little bit, maybe I don't want to say boring, but this has to be done. This is just really crucial stuff. What I like is when I do these sessions, a lot of customers, they didn't realize it. It's oh, we didn't realize we didn't think about all these things. Well, you kind of do if you want to make sure you have a successful rollout. So the backup, I mentioned before, teams are stored for 30 days in the recycle bin. And with that, I mean everything, right? It's not just the team with the chat, it's also the SharePoint files, the planner, stream, everything that's connected to it. After those 30 days, it's gone, right? It's just by team and everything. Channels have their own recycle bin for 30 days. Content works with the recycle bin in SharePoint. So you have 93 days, then it's also gone. Videos are stored in a recycle bin within Stream 30 days. Planner doesn't have one. Really annoying. It would be so nice to have a task recycle bin, but unfortunately, it's not the case. So what you have to do, you basically have to review if these options are fine for you as an organization, or maybe you have some regulations or internal agreements that don't match, and then you have to look into third-party tools. And the one I've experienced is AvePoint. It's a really, really good solution. So definitely recommend checking it out. That said, there are more vendors out there, right? So take a look. But I saw AvePoint and it looked really good. So that's the reason I included them. But definitely just take a look for yourself as well. Again, retention, very, very important. Sensitivity labels. So what I'm going to do quickly is to see if there's no hiccups or no. Yeah, there's some questions, so it's good. It's good. I will answer your questions after the session because then I just have enough time to go over it. So definitely try to stick around. And there's a couple of people asking questions. I'll answer those for you, so no worries. Yeah, sensitivity labels. So this sensitivity labels have been around for a while. They're used to classify content, but now they're in preview. You have the option to also apply that label to a team. And when you do that, you can say, and I think I included a screenshot later on. So let me quickly check. I think I did. Yeah, I did. Just let me minimize this. Here we go. So you can say when this label has been attached, for example, internal confidential, the team is automatically private or public. That's one option. The other option is you can turn on or off guest access, and you can also work with unmanaged devices. So that means if somebody connects with an unmanaged device, he or she is not able to work with the SharePoint content, or only through the browser, or they have full access. Make sure when you turn this on, do something like this. Discuss this with your colleague or colleagues who work with policies for Intune, because they will see a policy popping up and it'll be like, where does this come from? So just talk with each other before you do that. Very crucial. Let's say I attach a label to a team. What I said, internal confidential. It does nothing with the content, right? So the content is not encrypted, for example. I have the feeling in the future this will be available. It would be nice, right? I really hope that you can decide yourself if you want to turn it on or off. But for now, it does nothing with the content. This is what it looks like exactly. So this is just the settings menu of the sensitivity labels, and you now have this extra option that gives you basically the two options I just discussed, and now you a little bit of an idea what it looks like. So within Teams, let's say I pick confidential internal, you'll see I can only choose private as a privacy option for my team. My advice, I wouldn't apply it now because it's still in preview. I think it'll be out of preview very soon because it's been in preview for several months. But just be careful with enabling preview features within your production tenant. You just never know. Like Microsoft can take stuff out or they add stuff, and it can cause issues. It doesn't have to, but it's a bit of a risk. But definitely once it is in general availability and you use self-service team creation, so we'll discuss in a second, highly recommend using it for sure. And again, data classification, separate project. DLP. So a DLP, very easy. You can prevent the sharing of sensitive information. You can do it in chat. So for example, a social security number. I'll show you an example as well. Or you can apply this to documents. So what does it look like? Again, this really annoys me that you need an E5 license for DLP and chat, just for chat, not for content. So please be aware of that. I just hope they change that anytime soon. This is what it looks like. I had a message, and it's just gibberish, but I added an IBAN number to it, I believe. Yeah, immediately get a message. Hey, it's blocked. You can see you get a pop-up on the right bottom, and then you can define that message yourself. So in this case, I added that message that says this message or item is blocked due to the presence, blah blah blah. That's the one I added. And then you can also allow your users to override it, and they have to give a justification, and the justification will be logged and sent to one or more people you basically defined in your policy. Same applies for content. This is what it looks like. I upload a document, a PDF in this case. I immediately get a warning, and again, I see the similar message I just witnessed in Teams. So definitely highly recommend looking into this. So look at the regulations that apply to you, or internal procedures. Once you've done that, please test DLP. It doesn't always work the way expected to do. I can talk from experience. This topic we'll talk about in a different session, but it doesn't always work the way you want to. So please do a lot of testing and educate and inform your employees, because what you saw in the examples, yeah, they will get a message, so they need to know why that is. So educate them and inform them. Again, I'll stop repeating this, but define it in a sub project. Retention. So you can say, okay, I want to retain my content or chat for X amount of days, years, or months. Yeah, days, months, years. I'm going to retain it for that period, or I want to retain it and then automatically delete it, or I just want to delete it, right? Those are the options you have for content and chat, right? Again, but as far as I remember, retention for chat, not for content, just for chat, isn't supported yet in private channels. You can find it if you just Google Microsoft Teams retention. I think it's at the top there, and I believe it's still not in scope. Again, similar to DLP, match your regulations, internal procedures. Do a lot of testing, make sure it works the way expected to work. Again, educate and inform, like adoption part, right? And again, separate project. Well, this all leads basically up to the decision: am I gonna allow my employees to create teams by themselves through the application, or I'm going to use a provisioning solution, right? So those are the options you have. You can say self-service for all, for selection, or you do it more control by using a provision mechanism where people can request a team, and then one or more people can approve it. You don't have to, but can, and then it's automatically created. How is that determined? Well, this is a bit of a tricky one because it's not one size fits all. This is really depends on the requirements of a customer. And these are some things I see. So it depends on the collaboration formats. Often when you just use Teams for a team, right? There's no distinction between departments, projects, what else wrote down, clients, etc. Yeah, then it already kind of lowers the necessity for a provision mechanism, right? But Teams currently doesn't really have a nice model for templates, and they just announced that build actually it's coming, and they're working on it. So I'm very curious to see how it works. So that can mean that if I want to use templates for departments, projects, I don't have to always use provisioning mechanism. So definitely keep an eye on that. It was just announced at build, so I'm very, very excited about that. But for now, still you will be more moved to provisioning. Also, when you have those collaboration formats, and they all have really unique naming policies, like the district, the municipality, no, probably not even pronounce it, but the district, like for them, yeah, they need those unique naming policies. So yeah, they're already moving towards provisioning. It's just no other way at this time. And also, if you have strict external access policies, I advise turn it on for all. Again, there are customers say like, no, it has to be turned off. Well, yeah, then like, well, yeah, okay, well then you have to use provisioning where that's automated, the process by the collaboration format somebody picks. Similar for expiration policies, and those kind of things. Those kind of things basically determine if you can use self-service by the application, Microsoft Teams application, or if you have to move towards a provisioning solution. Well, almost there. Almost there. There's so many settings. Like when I started to really dive into governance and I set up a whole proposition internally and like best practices, I was like, holy cow, man, there's so many settings. Like it's definitely really interesting to dive into, because I think there's a lot more than you think there is, right? So again, if you go to the Teams Administration Center, there's also some important settings. You have policies. You can say, everybody within my tenant or a subset of people can discover private teams. And what that means is that the owner of a team, even if it's private, can tick a box saying, okay, people can still find this team. They can search for it. And then then the owners can say, okay, this person is requested to have access. He or she can access, right? And the other one is somebody allowed to create private channels, right? You can turn it on or off. Subset or everybody. Oh, sorry, went too fast. And then you have message policies. Are people, for example, allowed to edit their own messages? Are guests able to, later on, but for guests the same. It's like, can guests edit their own messages? Do you want to block GIFs, for example, or emojis or stickers? Are people able to manage their own read receipts? So with read receipts, is that really annoying thing in WhatsApp? When you send somebody a message, it's like you see they got it, and it's like, why am I not getting a message back? Do you want that same stress within Teams? There you go. Look into read receipts. I turn it off because I find it super annoying. but it's just probably me. So apps. So do you want to allow Microsoft apps? Well, I would, because then people can use Planner and SharePoint. But what I often see is that third-party apps are often blocked, or only a subset are allowed. But it's something you have to decide as well. Some general settings. Do we want to allow tagging? Relatively new feature. That's where people can create a tag, assign people to the tag, and when the tag is used within a chat, those people get a notification. And third-party file storage. I believe by default it's on, and that basically means that people, but in Teams you have that on the left side, you have files. People can add their own Box account or Dropbox account. Yeah, I wouldn't do it, but that's something you have to turn off there. So we've done this workshop. Again, we do it in 2 hours, one session, awareness, demo, assigning tasks. Okay, who's going to decide about the collaboration formats and all these other topics I discussed. Ideally, 2-3 weeks later, we come back together and go over everything we just discussed. We get an agreement, right? Everybody needs to be on the same page. We add these all into a document. I know it's not super original, but it's a Word document. I present these findings, so we get it all, these topics. And like what's nice these days is we do it together. So it's not just me who has to write down this whole document, but again, everybody writes it in there. I do reviews. I present the findings. So okay, these are the key findings of our governance strategy. And then we have to finalize it. Everybody says like, okay, we're all happy with this, right? And you have to be aware that it's at this moment, right? Governments will change. You know, for example, the COVID thing wasn't always there, so that definitely has impact on your rollout and usage of Teams, right? So they will have an impact. Maybe your organization will change. Maybe there'll be new regulations. So that's why the steering committee is very important, because they'll be on top of those things, and that can mean that your governance strategy will change over time. And then, of course, right, maybe within your governance strategy, you set certain settings that are different from the standard. So, for example, one of the standard settings is that guests aren't allowed to edit their own messages or delete their own messages. Well, let's say from a governance strategy point of view, you say, okay, I want to allow that. Somebody has to configure that. And of course, there's often, really almost all the time, a need for a governance solution. So I'm a huge fan, probably most people know that, a huge fan of ShareGate. They have a tool called Apricot, and that's a great solution to apply governance in a self-service situation. So where people already create teams by themselves, and it gives you a really nice subset of tools to apply governance. So you can be more in charge of who are the owners. You can work with the notification emails being sent, or reviews for external sharing links. They now also introduce a bot that will ask the owners afterwards, what is the category of this team? The categories you can define, so it can be the ones I discussed, right? Department, project, it's the ones you define, and then later on you can apply actions to that. AvePoint is also an excellent tool. I've seen as well a couple of demos, really well done. It's also has a bit more focus on the first part, so the provisioning part, and of course also the maintenance part. Again, both tools pretty good. They have their own price tags, so to speak, so definitely look into that as well. But definitely worth checking out. And you can also create your own, of course. There's a lot of documentation out there. I think I made it. 2 more minutes, so that's pretty good. I cut down some stuff from the last time I did this. The last time I talked a little bit more about scope and vision and goals, and yeah, there's just too much to talk about in 50 minutes. That said, we live in difficult times. Yeah, pretty unique times. If you can, donate to charity. These are just, of course, 2 examples. This probably differs per country, but if you could donate to charity, definitely do. What we've done a lot lately is order food from restaurants who are not able to open. I think that's a very good initiative as well. That allowed them to still be in business and still ship their products. Again, totally up to you, right? No, don't feel forced to do this, but I think if we just help each other out, it really makes a huge difference. I think that definitely does. I would love to have your feedback. To be fair, I have no idea how many people were in this session. I don't think you can see it actually. So I think I saw some questions, or at least there are a couple of people. Give me some feedback. If you think I can improve things, definitely tell me. If you think it was good, I would like to hear it as well. Especially Dutch people always tend to give more the negative than the positive. So also give this event feedback, because I think it's unbelievable that they've how quickly they set this up. It was like I'm not I'm not jealous to be on the other side, in the producing side. So definitely give them feedback as well. Yeah, and again, thanks for joining us and joining me. And if you have any questions, I'm always on Twitter. So this is my Twitter handle. You can also look me up on LinkedIn. So if you just look for my name, Jasper Oosterveld, you'll find me. Connect with me, and then yeah, if you have any questions, you can find me there as well. So what I will do now, I'll mute myself, and I saw some questions in the chat, so I'll answer those. So if you ask a question there, just yeah, bear with me, and then I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.